so that you can go find the actual source and form your own opinion. And I appreciate that there are media present, or actually I appreciate knowing that there are media present because it does change a little the way I present the material. And not just because half of the room comprises Bank of Hawaii refugees either. So, you know, it's been quite the roller coaster for the economy. I'm illustrating that here with GDP indexed to the peak of the cycle. So the peak of the cycle is the number 1, where that horizontal line runs across the screen. This is a slide I actually borrowed or stole from Robert Hall, who's the chair of the National Bureau of Economic Research Dating Committee, and they're the 5 individuals who decide when the peak and trough of the business cycle are. So a recession is going from the peak to the trough, and a recovery is going from a trough back to the previous peak. And once you've gone beyond the previous peak, you're into the next expansion. And that happened about 5 minutes ago, so you'll be happy to know the expansion of the 20 teens is already underway. No, Friday we'll get data for the second quarter of this year that should confirm that the second quarter real GDP estimate, during which time the national economy is growing at about a 2% annual rate, down from 2.7 in the first quarter, at which time we'll find that GDP was just below the previous peak, which was the fourth quarter of 2007, right before the recession began. Actually, the peak was, I have that wrong. The peak was actually second quarter of 2008. And it's a weird situation in which when the NBER Dating Committee decided to make the call, they said, no, we're going to go back to the end of 2007 and date the peak as having occurred 6 months prior to the peak for real GDP, which is not uncontroversial. And in fact, their decision not to already make the call on when the trough was, because they haven't officially made that call, well, this is like, who cares except for 5 other economists, but one of the members of the dating committee, you know, was all pissed that he got outvoted at the last meeting. So he posted on his blog all of this big rant about how the other guys were idiots. And so you'll just have to trust me that the trough was probably a year ago, and that we're right at that moment, going from the second quarter to the third quarter of this year, that we kind of punch out and commence, in terms of GDP, the expansion of the 20 teens. There are other indicators, obviously, that have to be paid attention to. The NBER, the shortlist for the National Bureau of Economic Research, includes, in addition to real GDP, as I've shown here, industrial production, employment, a couple other things. I mean, it's on Hall's spreadsheet. So I just took his spreadsheet and updated. But the point I started out making is that the roller coaster this time had a much deeper, much more precipitous drop from the top to the bottom of this cycle, of this recession, than any prior experience in the post-World War II era, at any rate. So you have to really go back to the Great Depression to get anything like this. And I'm illustrating the average of the last seven recessions in another series on this screen, just to give you a feel for, you know, how far down and how far down we went and how hard the fall was. Obviously, it was a global experience, a globally synchronized recession. And for all those people that still think there are many sort of persistent myths in Hawaii, but for those that still believe that Hawaii lags the mainland, okay, it's a globally synchronized recession. It did not happen everywhere else on the planet except Hawaii. It happened everywhere at the same time. And that's particularly true, as you know, in the housing market, for which we can appeal to the past to find periods where we seemed out of sync. But this time, by virtually every measure, Hawaii was synced up. I'll switch from levels to growth to illustrate what people are forecasting, to sort of frame where we end up with the characterization of the forecast. This is, I just downloaded this from the International Monetary Fund website. They're looking at growth in the advanced country universe in the range of 2 to 3%, growth in the emerging markets complex in the range of 6 to 8%.